everyone, and welcome back. This session explores another amazing partnership in the music industry. We have pop hitmaker Amy Allen joining us to talk about her path to songwriting success with her super manager and Warner Records VP of A&R, Gabz Landman. So I'll let you take it away, ladies. Tell us what makes you two such a great team.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. It's a good question. Amy and I have been working together for about 4 years now, and the capacity we've worked in has changed from publisher to manager to A&R. And I think some of the main things that have kind of helped us really work well together is, first and foremost, I count myself as Amy's biggest fan, which means that anytime I get a new song, it makes my day. I'm like looking forward to hearing from her. We have a lot of trust, I would say, and there is a lot of communication. I don't think there's a time of day where Amy can't reach me or vice versa. And one of the most important things is that there's kind of like full honesty. If Amy sends me a song I'm not sure could get cut or I don't think is like the best she's ever written, I'm always very upfront about that. And just in working together for such a long time, you start to figure out what people do and don't enjoy. I've kind of, I think, figured out a rhythm of the kind of writers and collaborators Amy will work best with, whether it's a personality match or writing skill set. And Amy might have more to fill in on that side too.
Yeah, I think for us it was just becoming friends right off the bat and being really honest with what I wanted out of my music career, and you know what Gabz is interested in, what Gabz liked about what I did, and what I really liked about what Gabz did, and just along the line, kind of like filling each other in. If she presented me with a session and I gave her feedback on, you know, how it went, and then she would start to learn more about like what my strengths are and what I like to do, and you know what I kind of like veer away from, and just yeah, kind of like naturally through osmosis, we kind of started to learn more about each other and just champion each other through all of it. So it's helped a lot.
100%. So I thought we could start with a bit of history. Kind of let's get back to basics. When did you get into music?
I started playing music when I was probably like 8 years old. I got an electric bass to join my sister's, my older sister's all-girl rock band. And they needed a bass player, and my sister was the drummer. And I really wanted to be the guitarist, but there were already two guitarists, so I was the bass player, which actually ended up being really lucky because I think starting on bass taught me a lot about rhythm and, you know, how not to overplay, how to just be able to like be part of the rhythm section and learn a lot of different grooves and different styles. So that was really cool. And then kind of did that for a few years, and then I finally got a guitar and started writing my own songs like immediately, probably around like 10 or 11. And my sister and I would play, we would like go play at like little like pubs and coffee houses together and write songs together, and we just did that for a really long time, and I loved it. And then she ended up going away to college, and I still had a few years of high school, so I continued on my own and then kind of took it away from there.
I think it's pretty amazing how supportive your family are of your musical endeavors, and like your parents are such huge music fans. Do you want to talk a bit about your dad's kind of influence on you musically and the shows you guys went to together and that side of things?
Yeah, everybody always asks me about if there's music that runs in my family, and there's no real musician in my family. My mom takes ukulele lessons, and my dad is a huge, obviously, like most dads, classic rock fan. So that's kind of how I got into it. When I was younger, my dad would drive us to and from sports, and we lived kind of far away from our school. So I would have like an hour both ways just listening to music that he loved, like the Rolling Stones and Aerosmith and Stevie Nicks and all of that. So I got really into like storytelling and lyrics and, you know, listening to electric guitar solos and just hearing music through bands and through like rock. So that's kind of how I like got into it and wanted to start making my own songs through that.
I think that that probably also gave your songwriting a bit of an edge because when you approach writing, even for other artists, you're coming at it from a different angle than what's on the radio right now. It's like this, we can talk a bit later about your artist project, but even on Spotify, you have a playlist right now with your favorite songs. And a lot of those artists are the ones you just mentioned your dad driving around to. So I definitely think that's a big part of your artistic identity and just growing up on those greats and seeing them live, which is cool.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when I'm talking to people that want to start songwriting or people that are trying to find their voice in songwriting, the thing that I always kind of come back to is what feels like the most authentic to you and what you grew up listening to and what you've always, or like what you've evolved into listening to and what makes you feel any type of emotion and just trying to capitalize on that and find your voice through that. Because I find like sometimes a lot of people that want to become songwriters are listening to the radio and are kind of like trying to, grab and pull all these different identities together and do what's on the radio. But obviously, as we all know, the radio trends change all the time. And so it's just so important to just, you know, try to find your voice about, what you grew up listening to and what makes you feel something and just stick to that and just try not to care about what the trends are because those are always going to change.
I think that makes you way more distinctive too. So okay, your sister goes off to college, you're in high school playing, and then you end up at Berklee studying songwriting.
Mhm.
So I know at that point in time you also fronted your own band, Amy and the Engine. Like, talk to us a bit about that time in your life.
I love that time in my life. That's like one of my favorite few years to just look back and think about because it was such a growing period for me musically. I went I went to Boston College for studying something completely different. I was doing biochemistry and nursing there, and then like a year and a half into that, I was still playing at coffee houses and I knew that music was what I loved to do, but I wasn't getting to do it in the capacity that I wanted to. And so I made the switch and I think finally getting to Berklee and having this like huge exhale of just getting to play music all the time and getting to learn more about music than I'd ever known was just so refreshing and so eye opening. And I was just really willing to like take everything in and learn as much about everything as I could because I just come from this place where I was not happy at all studying what I was studying. So I pretty early on started the band with just like two friends really. And it was so fun. We just started small and somebody for their senior project asked to record the band. Um, so we made like a little EP with this guy who was recording us, and then we kind of started using that as our like business card almost to like get to play and open for bands coming through Boston. And we played at a lot of like Boston quintessential venues, which were really fun. And we kind of just slowly were working our way up the ranks to bigger shows and branching out of Boston and going down to New York a bit and going back to my hometown in Portland a bit to play. And yeah, it was just really cool because there were no restraints on it really. I wasn't like thinking about the radio. I didn't know anything about any part of the industry. It was just very pure and making music because I loved it. And I think that's what everybody kind of strives for. Once you get into the industry, it can be easy to lose sight of that a little bit because there are so many outside pressures of what's trending and who's looking for what. And that time in my life was just like very pure and fun and awesome.
I know having seen you perform live, just there's kind of like a magic to being on stage, and that must have been so fun for you in that point.
Yeah, I
And
love
so I guess
it.
Berklee was a crash course in collaboration, which must have come in handy further down the line when you were in all these different writing rooms. So
Totally. I think, and that's another thing I talk to a lot of early writers about too, is that you can only kind of learn so much by yourself. I mean, you can learn a lot. You can pretty much learn everything, but I think the extra like 10 to 15% is always collaboration. Even if you end up writing your best songs by yourself, I think it sounds counterintuitive, but I think it's actually easier to find your voice writing with other people sometimes because you get to learn the parameters. Whereas sometimes if you don't write with anybody, you just sit on your bed and write all your songs alone all the time. It's a little bit harder to push yourself to those boundaries. And I found that I was writing with different people every day, coming from completely different backgrounds and listening to music that I hated or I didn't understand or I loved. And, it's just like just learning to go with the flow and see how other people's brains work and then realizing, okay, that's really cool, but I could take a little piece of that. And then it kind of just like starts incorporating into your own music. And then all of a sudden you have kind of like found this new unique sound that is just like, you know, kind of a culmination of everything. So I found that collaborating was like the key to me being able to figure out what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it.
I always think that you can almost learn more from a bad or difficult writing session than from a straightforward, easy one. So,
First. Yeah. And I always kind of had the attitude, which I think is important for a long time. Like even when we'll talk about when I moved to LA, but I always wanted to be the worst writer in the room. Like to me, that was like almost imperative that was the situation I was walking into, whether it was at Berklee or when I moved to LA or when I was in New York. Like I wanted to be with people that were like hitting the ball back twice as hard as I knew how to hit it back, And I think having that attitude with songwriting is really important because it's easy to stay in this like little safe shell and you just get so much better if you're willing to, try to like play ball with people that are better than you at the time, It helps a lot.
takes a lot of thick skin too, but I think that just speaks to the ambition that you have and have always had. I mean, from leaving biochemistry to go study music or being at the top of your game as a songwriter and putting that aside to make your own album, I think it's really impressive how at every turn you're always following your dreams. And that is just very inspiring. So I guess, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. You're at Berklee, you're touring. Next thing you know, you graduate, move to New York, and you start writing sessions. How did that happen? And I'm also curious, in the very beginning, before you had a team in place, how were you getting sessions and meeting people to write with?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I had kind of like a unique story, but I guess everybody's story is unique when it happens. So when I was at Berklee, like I said, I was still playing shows with the band all the time, pretty much every weekend. And this woman that I absolutely adore, and she's a mentor for me. Her name is Bonnie Hayes. She's the head of the songwriting department at Berklee. Would bring um, different executives of labels, of publishing companies, of whatever through Berklee, and they would hold these little seminars. And of course, I was like always going to those because I was really eager to figure out as much as I could. And I played him. I think he like played a few student songs or something at one of the seminar, and one of my songs was submitted. And him and I ended up just talking after, and I sent him a few of my songs, and then his name was Benjamin Groff at the time. He worked at Cobalt Publishing, and he then sent it to somebody at Sony, then sent it to somebody else, and then kind of like trickled down to this attorney in New York. And like, I didn't really need an attorney at the time. I didn't really know why. But when I moved to New York with the band, with the idea of continuing to play more shows, I think like my second day in New York, I went to meet with this attorney. And he had randomly been managing this guy, Scott Harris, who I didn't know of at the time, but found out to learn that he co-writes all of Shawn Mendes's songs and, has written for like every massive pop star that today. So him and I met up. He played, this attorney sent Scott some of my songs, and Scott and I started writing, and it kind of took off from there. Scott, was gone traveling a lot with Sean or whoever he was working with. So if he couldn't do a session with me, he would be like, go meet my friend Micah, or go, he would kind of like send me to a bunch of different people, and I would just rock up and just try to do my best. And a lot of times it was not very good, but Micah, I was one of the my co-writers on the song Back to You, which I ended up writing for Selena Gomez. So it just kind of like switched gears pretty quickly once I moved to New York. I met Scott, fell in love with writing, just like kind of put the band on the back burner for a minute because I really wanted to be able to support myself a little bit more comfortably than I was. And yeah, Scott just kind of like opened my eyes to this world of writing for other people and making a living out of it. And I loved it. So I switched to that.
That was a funny kind of like kismet moment because Scott Harris and I are longtime friends and have done some work together. And when I was working at APG, a scout had sent me Amy and the Engines music, and Amy was headed to LA. We met while she was there for a week. And, I was like, you're in New York, you should work with Scott Harris. And she was like, that's so funny. I think I'm working with him. So I called Scott after we met and I was like, you need to tell me how Amy is to write with. And I think they worked together the following week. And he called me immediately afterwards and said, Amy is the best new writer I've ever worked with. You have to sign her. And in an amazing turn of events, about a year and a half later, because these things take time, Scott and I ended up signing our publishing together with Zach Garker, who manages him. But I remember from day one, Scott just being an amazing believer. And I'd love to know, I think a lot of people watching this probably are considering mentorship. Like, what role did that play for you? How important was it having this figure in your life to turn to for advice? And just, you mentioned he connected you with other writers, but I think there's more to your guys' relationship as well.
Yeah, I think honestly it was everything, because I know, at least speaking for myself, when you're first getting into the music world, it can kind of almost seem like this big, like, glass wall where you're like, I see it, I know exactly where I want to go and what I want to do, but like, how the hell do I like get on the other side or like break through this? Because it just seems like there's this wall of like executives and like weird meetings that I don't even know how to, get into there at all. So for me, everybody kind of has like their pivot person, and Scott was my pivot person for sure, because once I started working with Scott, not only did he show me that it's possible to make a great living off of songwriting and have fun doing it, and get to meet the most amazing artists in the world and travel and just make an incredible lifestyle out of writing for other people, but he also introduced me to the people that would allow that to happen, like Gabs, and like Mike Heron, who I later met, and a bunch of Sean Mendez, just linking me with people that really have helped shape the course of my career. And I think to anybody that's listening that is finding it hard to find their pivot person like Scott was for me, or how to kind of like get in there, it's really like just takes one person to champion you, like Gabs championed me, or like Scott championed me. And sometimes it seems really overwhelming to try to like get in there and figure out how you meet that person, but I have found that it's actually you know it's actually kind of doable. If you do a little bit of research online, you can find A&R's emails very, easily. A lot of times it's like their name dot last name at blah, and you can send them songs. Like I wouldn't send them every day, but I think if you have a few, like that's their job, and that makes them look so cool to have like this new, like found talent. So I think just put in some of like those 10,000 hours into who you can connect with, and who you can be writing with, and how you can be collaborating with people, because I know it can seem really overwhelming just kind of like sitting in your bedroom and seeing what you want and not knowing how to get there. So yeah.
I think doing that also, your story about meeting Benjamin Groff and that's somehow trickling to an attorney, a lot of times you never know when you send one email where it's going to wind up. People forward things on, they refer people, and you ended up kind of like step by step assembling your core team. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you met the various people that you work with. I mean, you started with your attorney, as we know, then you signed with Scott for publishing, ended up at APG. At this point, no manager on board. I think a lot of songwriters assume that that is the be all end all. Like, I need a manager first things first. I would argue that an attorney can be more helpful, and beyond that, a PRO like ASCAP that we love and have had the best experiences with. Those things can preceding a manager can actually help you meet an even better team of people. So I guess, how did you end up assembling your team? What was important to you? I think there are a lot of similarities in the kinds of people you gravitate towards working with. So
Right. So I think everybody does this in a different way, but I'll just speak about how I did it. Whether or not that's the right way for you, I don't know. But for me, it's always been really important. Like, even just with my band members, when I was, kind of trying to like figure out who I wanted to be in a band with, it was always the most important thing for me that, like, at the end of the day, there were people that loved what I did and I loved what they did, and we respect each other and we would like want to hang out. And a lot of people will say, like, you don't need to want to hang out with your attorney. But also, I'm like, I have to spend a lot of time talking on the phone with my attorney. And I want to trust my attorney to go to battle for me and know that we're like morally on the same page and that we understand each other. So for every single person I've brought into my team, that has been like a huge, if not the number one, like a very, very important part is like, do I enjoy speaking with them and do we like line up morally on like how we go about treating people and maneuvering throughout the industry. So the first time I met, Gabs, it was really instant. We just clicked, and we felt like we had known. Well, she kept me waiting in the
no,
in the waiting room for like 3 hours, and then she came and got me. But then we became friends, and it was very instant that like she connected with my music, and I really liked her demeanor of being very personable, but also kind of being a bulldog when she needs to be, and working harder than anybody else I know, and having this like natural talent for hearing a song and knowing who would be the best to sing that. Or when a song is terrible and I have no idea, just we just like kind of understood each other. And Scott and I were the exact same way. And I met with a lot of people. Like, when it became time to talk to managers, it was very instantly I could like tell if it was like going to be the right thing for me. And so anyways, to get to your question, I guess Scott and the attorney were kind of first, and then signing to APG, which is my publishing company, with Gabs, who was then at that publishing company, kind of came along second. And then I switched attorneys, ended up going with somebody that fit me on a much more like human level, of just being able to talk and understand each other. And then Gabs, just correct me if I'm wrong, because I get this order wrong all the time.
Scott introduced you to ASCAP.
Yeah, Scott introduced me to ASCAP, but that was semi more
ASCAP
recent.
was after APG.
Yeah, yeah. So then I found a PRO. So okay, I'll just break this down here. So it was first attorney who introduced me to Scott, who was a writing partner and a mentor. And then Scott became, part of my publishing company, which is how I met Gabs. And then through my publishing company, I then became associated with our beloved ASCAP. And then just recently, within the last year, I have found management, which is now also Gabs and this other company called Mick Management. So my order is, completely different than my friend's order, is completely different than my other friend's order. I think the most important thing along the way is to choose people that are your biggest champions and that you want to hang out with if you need to, because the worst feeling is having to have a really long hard conversation with somebody all the time on the phone about splits on a song or whatever it is, and every time you have to talk to them, you're like, oh, it's like it just makes life so unenjoyable. And I think it's really important to have people on your side that believe in you and that you get along with. So
I mean, we literally, your team go on vacation together. Like, we couldn't have more of a family vibe. So I think it's great that you just, pretty much any of us, you could call in the middle of the night, and I know you'd be able to get through. And that was something that was important too. Also, to your point, though, Scott didn't introduce us, and I do want to talk about how we met, because I'm sure people watching this have like a parent or an uncle or someone who's like, my neighbor's doctor's wife's receptionist dog works in music, and I'm sure you roll your eyes and you're like, whatever, nothing's going to come of it. But
this is true. This is a good story.
So there is an amazing A&R scout called Dan Snyder, and Dan was working in pharmaceuticals in Maine. And he emailed my Karen Amy's link because he saw her on Amy's cousin's Facebook. Like, I need to make that clearer. Like, Amy's video performing is on her cousin's Facebook. A pharmaceutical rep sends it to my Karen, and it reached me. So just seize any opportunity, because you never know where your music is going to end up and how it's going to fall into the right hands. Be open-minded about that. Thank you, Dan. Best intro ever.
Dan Snyder. We love it.
Okay, so you signed with this team, and then I think about 6 months after meeting Scott, you wrote back to you, which at that point, I was at APG. I really wanted to sign you, but as any A&R can attest, it's difficult in this climate to sign someone just because you think they're good. A lot of the times there needs to be some proof of concept or a cut coming, or they're working with somebody like Scott, but there usually has to be more than sheer talent, unfortunately. I wish it was different. And then Back to You ends up in the hands of Aaron Bayshot, and Selena Gomez takes it. And every publishing company in the world is trying to sign you, which is both a dream scenario and a nightmare in other ways, I am sure. But how did you kind of go about that process of meeting all these different companies? And first of all, I know each of them were putting you in different sections, which is, again, a great opportunity, but like, you only have so many hours every day. How did you go about picking which sessions to do, how to allocate your time, etc.? Just take us through that point.
Yeah. Okay. Well, another thing, I guess I'll just touch on the first part of the question, which is about how I chose publishing, for instance. I'll just break it down there. I think for me, like picking members of my team and wanting them to be family, people that believed in me early on, I've always had an allegiance to. So, Gabz at that point worked at APG, and I met with so many different A&Rs at pretty much every publishing company once Back to You happened. Sorry, there's a siren going by. And made the rounds, talked to everybody. And at the end of the day, I was like, Gabz is at APG. I need to be with Gabz. Gabz was like my first meeting. She believes in me the most. I know that for a fact. She's not just jumping on the bandwagon because I have like a big song right now. She's genuinely believed in me since I was, sending her demos from my band. So that to me was kind of a no-brainer at the end of the day. Like, I knew that I had to be with Gabz. And a lot of people will tell you differently. Some people say don't pick based on the A&R because A&Rs move, which they do, and Gabz did move. But then she became my manager, and it ended up working out for the best. And it's a lot of the time, which is really hard to understand in the moment because it's scary and it is a big deal in the moment, picking who you want to sign with, which can be for a few years. It's not always a short term. It can be scary, but I think just going with your gut and going with who champions you, and because that's how you're going to have the most success, and you want to win with your friends. And even though Gabz is only there for, I don't know, how long were you there for while I was there? A year?
Year and a half.
That was like Back to You happened, Without Me happened. A lot of songs that would have never happened had I signed with Gabz there, so I don't regret it at all, and I'm really happy with that choice. So that was very much so like a loyalty decision for me. And it is really eye-opening once you have your first song or whatever it is, going back into, because my band had like met with, I won't say who, but like a few labels, and I knew a few people in the industry at that point, and it was really interesting to just see how overnight, like, totally different conversations going on, and totally different vibes from different people, like really excited to talk now and like all these different things, which is just part of music, and it sucks, and that's just part of life, like when something is going well for you, people sometimes treat you differently. And I think it's just being able to stay on your own course and remember who, was digging you back when that wasn't happening. And it has totally come full circle too with Aaron Bashak. Now that I know you'll probably get to this, Gabs, but now that I've signed my own record deal, Aaron Bashak was at that point, in charge of kind of like Selena's career at Interscope. And he went out on a limb for me with Back to You. And there was like no big writer on that song. It was like me and a friend. We didn't have any big songs. And he championed that song. And that stuck with me forever, because then now when I've just signed my label deal and I had a bunch of different labels that I could have gone with, like I just knew that Aaron was like the only actual choice, because he had supported me since, the past 3 years at this point. So just like always remembering that how you treat people and how other people treat you, like that just always sticks with you. So I think that has helped me a lot of how to prioritize and how to pick team members and things like that. And yeah.
I think you've also been really graceful with those people that do come around and suddenly care when, you could easily just look at that and be like, oh, now you want to talk to me. But actually, it's a compliment and it's a sign that you're doing something right. So I love your positivity when it comes to that too. Okay, so you're signed to APG, you moved to LA, but I think that that was a huge benefit to you being in New York writing for that year, not only because of your access to Scott, but that's kind of slim pickings for people to work with there. So how did that benefit you?
I think that it was a complete blessing for me, because having come from Berklee, I didn't really have any real industry experience at all. I was pretty much just with my band, playing a lot of shows and writing with some classmates. I didn't really have any like real life industry experience. And I think moving to LA at that point in my life would have had a pretty different outcome for me. Because obviously LA is the pop songwriting hub, and there are exponentially more people there in the songwriting world than there are right now in New York. It's just like the whole industry moved. So I think going to New York for me was amazing, because Scott, it happens to be like one of the few, pop songwriters that are competitively still in New York right now. And so getting to work with him one on one was a complete blessing, because I learned a lot. And he was living there, and just a smaller pool, of people to call on if, like a DJ is passing through New York. There's, a handful of pop writers that Sony or Warner, Chapel, or whoever might know to call to come into that session. And I kind of like forced my way to become one of those people. And then just through working my butt off and making relations, then I became the person that I was getting called all the time. And so then when I decided I wanted to move to LA, it was a much different move, because a lot of, different A&Rs and whatever people championed me in New York. And I had their blessing when I got to LA. They had put in a good word for people, and were setting me up in sessions already. So it was kind of like becoming a slightly bigger fish in a much smaller pond, and then moving to a huge pond, and, feeling a little bit more comfortable versus just like diving in, not knowing anything, and like trying to swim to the top of this massive shark-ridden pond.
It was kind of like a boot camp being.
Yeah, it was completely like a boot camp, and it was only a year, but I think within a year I learned like so much about myself and who I connected to writing wise, the type of person, the type of artist that I liked working with. And of course, that's always evolving, but those are like some pretty important building blocks. I always say to anybody that's just moved to LA or to New York, like just spend the first 8 months to a year finding out like who your core people are, because that's so important. Even if they're not like the people that are making the big songs on the radio, like doesn't matter if you have like a rapport with them and you trust each other, and you'll get there. It's just about like finding those people that you can like find that like magic with. It takes a bit of time to figure out who they are.
I also think that it's very daunting going from working with like your buddy down the road and suddenly, whether it's a DJ or even a brand new artist, like being in the room with an artist is an entirely different thing to writing songs for pitch. And having that training in New York with less pressure, by the time you got to LA, pretty quickly things escalated for you, which was incredible, but you had been seasoned in working with artists and catering to them and figuring out how to accomplish their vision.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess maybe talk a bit about those differences and just how prepared you felt in the moment when it felt to people, I'm sure, a bit like an overnight success, but a lot of hard work went into that.
Yeah, it's something that I'm still learning a lot about how to do that the most efficient way, but it is really important to be able to switch back and forth, right? So if you're writing for pitch, it means there's no artist in the room. You guys are just writing a song, whether you have an idea of who you want it to be for or not. It's just you, maybe, and a producer or another writer making that song. And so you can completely steer it. I can walk in, like back to you. I like walked in, had this life experience. I had like come up with the chorus melody the night before. I knew exactly how I wanted it to be said. My friend and I just kind of like chopped away at it. And at the end of the day, we had the song. But it was in a very emotionally driven thing for me. And I knew I could like see the through line of like how I wanted that song to go. Versus going into a studio with Selena or with Camilla or whoever it is, like you need to be able to read the artist. And sometimes they'll come in and they'll have a lot to say. And you will just be kind of like talking and, just like quietly taking notes in the back of your head of like, oh, they're talking a lot about this. This is probably what we should be writing about today. And learning how to, either like steer it, but kind of like allow them to be on this journey with you and taking their input all the time, or allowing them to steer it and sitting in the passenger seat and being like, that's good. Maybe let's change that. It's just every artist is different and every session and vibe is different. And that is an art in and of itself. And I think the people that you see that are having hit after hit after hit on the radio are usually the ones that are the best at that like know how to work with an artist very well and allow the artist to feel comfortable and heard. Yeah.
So we have about 10 minutes left. I want to just have you address a bit about the transition from being a songwriter to finally taking the reins and going back to being an artist. Like, you're literally at the peak of your career. You have, Without Me, break records, go #1 on radio and the Billboard Hot 100. You're working with Harry Styles, which is like a dream collaboration for you. And you're like, you know what? I miss performing. I'm going to say no to working with all these incredible people and make my own album now. I think that takes a lot of courage, and some people probably thought you were crazy for it. But what kind of led to that decision? And then once you've answered this, I am going to ask you a few questions from the people watching too.
Okay. I just like have had a few conversations about this the past 2 days, just about the difference between writing for somebody else and writing for yourself. And I think in my head, there's like two types of people. There are like the type of people that love writing for other people, and that's all they want. And that is like everything for them. And hearing somebody sing their song is like as best as that's just like the pinnacle of their career. And I absolutely admire those people because I think that's such a beautiful, selfless way to express yourself and have your art exist in the world. And then there are other types of people, which I fall into, that once you start writing songs, and you start putting your personal stories to music, it's a beautiful thing to have people sing them, and it's exciting, and it's, you get to hear your song in a whole different way, and it gets to maybe way more people than it would ever get to be heard by, if you had done it. So there's so many pros to it, but there's always this like little voice that's like, but I love singing my own songs. Like, I love having that moment on stage where I can like look at you and be singing this lyric and know that that resonates with you the way that it resonates with me. And so at the end of the day, like, you're always getting pulled back to that area of like wanting to just do that because that is like your bread and butter. That's what you love. So I kind of always knew that I was like that, but because Back to You and then Without Me and Adore You, and I kind of started getting this momentum, it was like I was kind of forcing myself to push it further back because I just wanted to kind of like keep riding this wave, and it felt ridiculous to, take a big, again, life shift to now go back to doing the artist thing. But Gabs already knows the story, but I played Without Me at this like Grammy party 2 Grammys ago. And I had this like really emotional moment when I was on stage playing it because I hadn't performed in like probably 2 years at that point. And I had like made myself forget how much I loved that. And I just knew like instantly, right after I got off stage, I was like, I need to go back to it. I absolutely have to. I love writing for other people, and I want to do that for the rest of my life because I think it's so special, and I think getting to help other people share their stories is so important. But I just knew that I wanted to do my own thing too, and it was weird. Like, I had to kind of like rewire some pathways in my brain that were like, write the biggest pop chorus possible because that's what your job is. Your job is to like, write big pop songs. And that took me a while to be like, well, I started music just wanting to make something that made me feel something and made me feel like I was expressing myself, and that has nothing to do with the radio. So just like rewiring, and it has been scary, and it's been really fun, and I've learned a lot, and I'm so excited to be putting the album out. But it was a big life change, and I just encourage anybody, if you feel like I felt and you find yourself writing for other people, but you still always kind of have this desire to put out your own music, just do it. It's so freeing to have another outlet that is just yours and it's pure. And writing for other people is a blessing, and it's so fun and exciting to see your songs come out on a big stage like that. But if it's going to be like this little voice in your mind forever, you just got to put out your own stuff too. And it doesn't matter what happens with it. It just is so refreshing to have your own like pure outlet for music. So
And I will also say that all the people who wanted to work with you while you were busy making your album, who I was like, I'm sorry, she's busy, they're still down to right now that you have free time. It's not like those opportunities really went away. So following your dreams, again, I would prioritize. Okay, we have time for a question or two. This is actually interesting. I'm probably going to pronounce your name wrong. I'm sorry, but Zainab Khan is asking, she has two questions, which I actually think go hand in hand for you. One is, have you ever felt like you needed to know more or to have more technical skills before putting yourself out there? And the second is the women-men ratio of the industry as tragic as it seems? And you've told me an anecdote before, your like microphone thing. I think that's kind of answers both of those in a nutshell. So
okay. Okay, I'll try to answer this as best as I can. The first one is that it's always important to have as much technical knowledge as you can. That being said, I am not the most tech savvy person in the world. Gabs knows this firsthand. I'm excited that I even got through this without any glitches, but I did work really hard for the past few years, like on guitar and whatever it could be, being able to record myself, just like having those as just new tools in your tool belt, because at the end of the day, like especially now, it's just important to be able to utilize those all the time. And coming into a session and, being able to play guitar or play piano and have an idea and being like, oh, this is how it goes, versus just being like, oh, I don't know how to do it, but I can hear it, but I don't know how to do it. It like allows more room for everything to be lost in translation. So I think always try to be as up on your chops as you can, but you don't have to be the best at everything. And then second answer to that question is the power still lies much more heavily in a men's world in music. I think there's so many women making amazing music and they just aren't being spotlighted yet, and they will be. And it's just this like humble fight that we're all fighting on the front lines of right now. So to all the women out there, keep going, keep making music. I wrote this like weird little poem about it. Actually, I don't even know if it's still on the Variety.
It's on Variety if you look it up.
It's basically like a bunch of little short lines about moments I've had in music where men just like assume you don't know how to do something or just everything. It's kind of funny. If you're into it, you can read
Check it out.
It's on Variety. Yeah.
There's another question here, which I'm happy to answer as well, from Lucy, asking about advice for young writers getting in the room with bigger, more influential writers and producers. And I will say, don't put emphasis on working with bigger writers and producers. Like Amy said, it's great in terms of training, but her first hit came from working with her contemporaries, which opened the door to a next tier of writer and producer. Some of these people, especially during COVID with Zoom sessions and remote things, just get in their DMs and be like, I'd love to send you some stuff.
Yeah.
But I would focus way more on finding your own tribe and people and making some magic happen with your kind of classmates, basically. So I think we're out of time. Thank you guys so much. If you have more questions, feel free to DM either of us. We will happily answer.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy and Gabz, for joining us here at the ASCAP Experience.